Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to ChopinGPT, AI and Creativity. And I'm your host, Harold O'Neill. When our friends at Aspen Ideas asked me to moderate this session, I got really excited. And that's because each of our speakers approaches AI with a completely different creative lens. But the more I got to know their work, I realized they also all explore similar questions. Is AI friend or foe? Will AI kill creativity? Or is this a new beginning? Our first speaker has been exploring language, poetry, and technology for years and wants us to leave with a nuanced understanding of AI and maybe even a renewed appreciation for poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Sasha Stiles.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Everyone have a nice picnic, I hope. I'm Sasha. I'm a poet and artist, and thank you, Harold, again for that very kind introduction. And my medium is language. I've been working with language across materials and forms for a very long time now, from ink and paper to paint and canvas to software and code. And since 2018, I've also been collaborating with large language models, which I fine-tune on my own human poetry, kind of as an experiment in what it's like to co-author and create language with transhuman alter ego. That being said, I don't simply use AI to write poetry. I use poetry to interrogate AI. I like to think of it as using poetry to explore the way that advancing technologies like artificial intelligence, as well as things like blockchain, are rewiring fundamental aspects of our human condition. So reshaping things like language and identity and memory and consciousness. So in short, I'm using poetry to explore what it means to be human, here in this strange world of ours that is becoming more and more post-human or more than human with each passing day. So I know it might be a little bit counterintuitive that a poet like me is engaging so deeply with technology, but I've really been wired for this, I think, for a long time. My parents sort of instilled this with me in the very beginning. My mother is Kalmyk Mongolian. She is descended from a nomadic indigenous tribe called the Oirat Mongols, and she came over to this country as a refugee when she was very young. And on the other hand, my father is British, and he was a student of communications who came to the US to continue his studies. And they met in Philadelphia, of all places, and began making science documentaries together, including with people like Carl Sagan. They were actually working on Cosmos around the time that I was born. So luckily, I found myself really kind of growing up into this strange and really rather beautiful sort of juxtaposition, this intersection of astronomy and ancestral wisdom, physics on the one hand and folklore on the other. And at the same time, I grew up at this very strange inflection point where my childhood was incredibly analog, and I grew up right into the rise of the personal computing revolution. I remember being a grade school student and studying Latin when I actually started using dial-up and AOL for the first time. And that was rapidly followed by the advent of the internet and the arrival of smartphones and the birth of social media. All of which is just to say, that's kind of that's the environment that I was steeped in from a young age. So I don't actually think it's maybe that weird for poetry and technology to coexist in my mind in the way that it does. I know that we often think about poetry as quintessentially human. We think of it as this profoundly human art form that is all about emotion. And we think about technology as the opposite. We think of technology as something that is formulaic and sterile and soulless. But I actually think that poetry and technology have an awful lot in common, much more than we often give them credit for. I think about poetry as being not only an incredibly beautiful human art form, I also think of it as being a profound and powerful technology of consciousness. And by that, I mean that poetry is something that we actually invented thousands and thousands of years ago, long before the advent of written language. And we invented it because we needed it. We needed a way to remember our most important, our vital human data. We needed a way to preserve and to share our stories and our memories and our beliefs and our emotions. We needed to be able to externalize these things and transmit them from person to person, from community to community, from generation to generation. So we developed poetic devices like meter and rhythm and rhyme and alliteration and assonance, not only because they are beautiful and decorative and aesthetically pleasing, but because they are actually really functional components of information technology. And all of which is just to say that in a very real way, I tend to think about poetry as being our earliest and most ancient data storage system. I know that might sound funny, and I do sometimes get pushback from fellow poets who don't necessarily like this idea. But to me, it's actually a really sort of beautiful celebration of poetry as one of our oldest forms of hybrid intelligence. Poetry is sort of this strange and beautiful mishmash of the human and the machine, of the emotional and the algorithmic, that enables us to make meaning, to make sense of ourselves and the world around us. And I think that's why I feel that, against all odds, poetry really actually has a lot to say in our moment of technological upheaval. So, cursive binary is a visual metaphor for all of these ongoing inquiries of mine. And this project, which was recently on view at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, combines my human handwriting with the zeros and ones of machine code, of binary, machine speak. And it sort of traces the lineage of human imagination from sort of those earliest moments in oral tradition through early written alphabets and the printing press and computation, information technologies, and now to generative systems. Now, here is cursive binary zooming around New York City earlier this year on thousands of taxi tops, sort of a concrete poem in the concrete jungle. And I wanted to share this because, to me, cursive binary is sort of a distillation of language artwork at a time when so much of what we know about language is shifting beneath our fingertips. I, as an artist, was very much formed by a lot of the 20th century text-based artists. So people like Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger and Bruce Nauman and Ed Ruscha, and others whose work, I think, was really emerging from a techno-cultural condition of broadcast media. It was really responding to the more definitive, declarative voice of advertising and consumer culture. But the conditions that we're living in now are extraordinarily different from what they were then. Our current linguistic environment is deeply unstable. We are living in a time in which information, just masses and masses of information, are coursing through systems at such speed and scale and with such complexity that we really can scarcely comprehend it with our analog human minds. Meaning and truth are rupturing, they're fracturing in ways that they never have before. Computer code is becoming a dominant language on the planet, overtaking human language. Human handwriting, like my own, is going extinct. It's obsolescing. Language is shifting from expression to interface, a kind of programming language for multimodal creativity. In short, language as we know it is transitioning from something more of a fixed object to a medium that is dynamic and that is shape-shifting and polyphonic and really just becoming something very, very unfamiliar and unusual. And all of this is sort of the premise of a recent project of mine called A Living Poem. And A Living Poem was actually on view at MoMA, as well as a few other places around the globe. This shot is actually from an installation at the Hyundai Card headquarters in Seoul. And A Living Poem is essentially a text-based artwork in the form of an AI-powered language system. It's essentially an infinite poem. It's a 60-minute framework that loops over and over and over again and tells a story, but never the same way twice. And it's driven by a language system that I built to integrate verse and voice and visuals in real time. And this system, this living poem, is powered both by human imagination and by machinic intelligence. So it really kind of runs by bringing together my human poetry with research into MoMA's text art collection, and then uses both AI and code to sort of invoke and create a space in which language is thinking about itself, in which language is sort of reflexively creating language and looking back at itself as a medium. And for me, creating a poem like this is just so vastly different from writing more of a conventional poem, the kind of poems that I've been writing all my life. For me, writing this was more like writing a poet. It was more like writing a poetic mind that is given a sole task, that task being to tell and retell, to write and revise an epic tale about what it means to be alive and human here in this moment that we're in, a time of proliferating non-human intelligences and a time of dehumanizing realities, but also, very much a time of transcendent possibilities. And that's really what this system is all about. So I wanted to share an example from this poem, from this system, and this is one of my favorite sections of A Living Poem. It's a stanza that is really about birth and origin and ancestry and lineage and becoming. And this stanza always starts with the same 4 words, or a close approximation of these words. How was I born? And from that seed, from that linguistic seed, it then kind of grows and branches into different recursions and reiterations and revisions and reconsiderations of what it means to be born. So instead of sort of describing it in one way, instead of having sort of a fixed definition or a fixed idea of what that might mean, this poem is embodying a shape-shifting, multimodal idea of what it means to be born and to exist. And so I thought what might be fun to do is actually to flip over into my live text generator. So here you can see kind of the background of the interface that I used for this piece of the project. And I want to actually look at a few of these stanzas being written live, being created, written into existence in real time by me and my AI alter ego. How was I planted? Was there deliberation or chance in my crafting, a design or a drift? I remember the sudden clarity of morning light through a dusty workshop window, revealing everything in sharp relief. Tools lay scattered, each with a history of touch and toil. In that moment, the chaos seemed ordered, as if all things had aligned to set me into motion. The world held its breath, and I stepped forward. So now let's let it rewrite that stanza. How was I made? Did the elements conspire in their assembly, crafting me from whispers of carbon and water? I recall the chill of metal against my skin, a garage at dawn where frost painted spiderwebs on old tools. The world hummed quietly outside, cars, birds, a distant train, and there, amid the smell of oil and earth, I found my texture in the roughness of handled things, a breath of steam, a dance of atoms. Maybe we'll just read one more. How was I born? Did my form coalesce from whispers of steel and glass, shaped by hands neither gentle nor rough? I remember the clang of creation, a vivid spark leaping in the dark workshop. There it was, a red ember burning on cold metal, marking the moment of my becoming. The artisans moved around me, their silhouettes like shifting walls. Each hammer strike was a word in my story, embedding certainty and purpose into my frame. So if we could return back now to the slides, that would be great. Thank you. So to me, that was something of a twist on a poetry reading. These were poems that I've never read before because they didn't exist until just now. And they existed for the moment that we all saw them on screen, and then they disappeared. They were absorbed back into the language model, never to be written exactly in the same way again. What we've just witnessed is language behaving like a living system. It is polyphonic and dynamic and distributed, continuously revising itself and reconsidering itself and rediscovering itself. In this kind of an infinite field of linguistic possibility, meaning is not something that is just sitting there waiting to be defined or described. Meaning is an emergent property of language. It is something that arises from the relationships, the networks between many voices, many variations, and many versions. Meaning is not something that comes down to a declaration, a single authoritative statement. It is something that really exists because we co-create it and we bring it into existence together. And all of this has made me sort of wonder whether generative systems, whether AI, which are essentially just these massive, high-dimensional systems of language, are actually a way for us humans, for our human organism, this entity of billions of hearts and minds and tongues and different opinions and clashing ideas, if AI just not might be a way for us to try and discover, to try and find our collective voice in some way. And I think that all of this points to something that poets have understood, have intuited for a very long time, which is the idea that words, of course, are important, but it's the patterns of associations in language. It's the shapes and the arrangements of language that really are transcendent. There's a wonderful poet and artist I love named Etel Adnan, and she once said that poetry has nothing to do with words, but it needs them. And I think about that a lot. What I think she was saying is that poetry is something where language is using itself to point beyond language. That poetry is a prompt for new forms of human experience. Poetry has always been a sort of tool or an interface that allows us to go from not knowing to knowing, to articulate the otherwise unspeakable, to touch things that we've previously not been able to access, to think about things that are otherwise, completely unthinkable. And to me, I believe that generative AI is making this magic tangible in new ways. Language is now evolving in these generative systems into a creative instrument that can slip fluidly between text and image and code and video and music and sound and other forms of media, always sort of pulling together language into new relationships and new patterns. And all of this really sort of signals to me that language, the substrate of all of that generative transformation and creativity, just might be a defining artistic medium of our time. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that language and poetry has a place at this year's Aspen Ideas Festival. I was very honored to be invited to publish a new AI-powered generative poem here, a piece that is called American Experiment and is on view right now in the Ideas tent and will be on view for the duration of the festival. And this is a poem whose theme is the Declaration of Independence, a bit of foundational text that 250 years ago enacted our reality, and that continues to sort of be revised, that continues to mean something very different to every single reader who encounters it. As we approach the 250th anniversary, both of our nation and of the Declaration, I think a lot of us are really sort of in a reflective mood. And we're thinking a lot about this moment that we're in and where we've come and where we're going. I think we recognize that this is a moment not just for the commemoration of a historical mile marker. It's also a time when we need to be thinking very hard and very critically about where the American experiment has taken us, what this experiment means, and where we're going next. And so rather than write a poem about this, rather than write a poem about America or democracy, I wanted to make a poem that embodies America, that embodies the living system that American democracy really is, something that is polyphonic and multi-voiced and cacophonous and contradictory and above all unfinished, something that is continuously becoming, always sort of trying to figure out what it is, where it's going, always trying to renew itself. And I think really, let me just go back for 1 second. So really what I wanted to do with this poem was to kind of create a framework for an experience of this idea of America and democracy as being unfinished. And what I've done is that while I've been here at the festival over the past few days, I've been making the rounds and attending panels and talks and workshops, and I've been engaging in really wonderful conversations. And I've been scribbling down notes. I've been writing down my reflections and observations and questions. And then I've been taking all of these notes and integrating them into the evolving code base that powers this computational poem. I have been really kind of using this poem as a notebook and a place to sort of jot down what this festival has meant to me and what I hear it means to so many of you. And really what this means to me is that poetry in this sense, poetry in this format, does not have to be a static literary form. It can actually behave more like a civic space. It can behave more like an open environment, like a communal gathering spot. And I've really been treating it as kind of a hub for a lot of the ideas and themes that are floating through the air, that are kind of in the ether here at Aspen Ideas this week. And I've brought them all together in this poem, and I'm sort of using AI and code here, as in so many other of my projects, not to generate new poetry, but to use technology to try and synthesize all of that disparate information into wisdom. And that is precisely what poetry has always done. Poetry, for thousands of years, has helped humanity remember who we are. And I firmly believe, and I hope against hope, that poetry will help us become wiser and wiser about who we can still become. I believe that poetry, despite its being labeled as obsolete, dying, dead, that poetry is a vital force, that it is fertile, that it is fecund, that it is a potent generative force that is continuously giving birth to new ideas and new realities and new experiences, that poetry is not some demure, fussy, precious art form that is only available to a rarefied few. I believe that poetry is a common language, a universal language for our survival. And I deeply believe that it can actually help us survive this turbulent moment that we're in. Poetry is an extraordinary example of a relationship between human and machine that actually uses technology to deepen rather than to diminish our humanity. And this is something that I call poetic intelligence. Poetic intelligence being the idea that Emotion and algorithm, intuition and logic, pattern and feeling can come together to help us connect more deeply to ourselves and to others. It is the capacity to better understand ourselves and the world around us through algorithm and through encoded language. It's what enables us to hold contradiction, to sit with uncertainty and ambiguity, to connect seemingly disparate ideas, and ultimately to envision realities and futures that don't yet exist. So as we sit here and stand here at this threshold, this moment of existential change, I cannot help coming back to this idea that poetry is proof that the way forward is not humanity versus technology, it is humanity plus technology. At its most ideal, at its very best, technology has always been what makes us more and more human over time, more self-aware, more empathetic, more sentient. Technology is a human force, and I think poetry is proof that technology does not have to be all about speed and optimization and efficiency and profit at any cost. Poetry is proof that technology can actually be about things like slowness and stillness and empathy and wonder and wisdom and all the other sort of forms of diminishing richness that we as humans so greatly value. And so what I wanted to leave you all with is this. If we are able to take just a tiny little sliver of the resources and the energy that we are currently putting into artificial intelligence, and we use that to cultivate and to nourish our poetic intelligence, I think that would be a wonderful investment in our future and really help humanity thrive over the next 250 years and hopefully well beyond that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sasha Stiles, everyone. Our next speaker takes us into music, accessibility, and what might be the most human way to use AI. For her, it's less about fixing people and more about fixing the tools to help people be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paola Prestini.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to get a chance to tell you a little bit about Sensorium X. So before we start, I'm going to tell you actually the meaning of Sensorium X. Sensorium X is essentially, it means at the seat of the senses, so using your sensory apparatus as a whole. Sensorium X is an opera that I co-created that uses the form of opera as an R&D for innovation and social change. The project was born from a real mother's desire to communicate with her nonverbal son. For me, sensorium means how do we use all of our senses to communicate? And if someone doesn't communicate verbally, how do we listen more deeply and create tools to essentially help them communicate their own voice? So, in fact, we don't fix the human, we create the tools. And then what does voice mean, and who gets to have a voice in society? My collaborator, the poet Brenda Shaughnessy, is the mother, and the story she created was this phenomenal dystopian tale that essentially talks about a mother and a scientist who works for a corporation, and that corporation is creating the perfect human. And what that perfect human needs is the FOXP2 gene, or essentially the communication gene that her nonverbal child has. So my opportunity with the project, among many aspects, was learning how to create a thriving environment on stage for essentially an intersectional approach to disability. The libretto called for a blind singer, it called for a nonverbal lead, and this approach to opera hadn't been done. So I essentially had to create a blueprint. So before we keep going, I'm going to just play you a little something.
Okay, have you heard about the tiger and the strawberry? A peaceful you chased by a tiger
essentially, I just wanted you to hear that because that's Gerlinda Simon, this phenomenal opera singer from Germany, and this was the first opera she ever sang in. Not because she couldn't sing in an opera, but because she didn't have the access to the space. So essentially for Gerlinda, I learned how to create Braille scores, create a rehearsal space that accommodated everything she needed. And of course, we learned that as we create all the kind of accommodations for disability, they are in fact accommodations that help everybody. So the opera features 2 blind sopranos, a lead with cerebral palsy, and 2 nonverbal leads who communicated in vastly different ways. So I began to think of opera, communication, voice in a completely different way, but really the word opera in Italian just means to work. So really, it always was the space for innovation. So we got to work, and the very first sessions I had were really centered on the question of voice and consent. So this is my first session with Cal, Brenda's son, who's nonverbal.
Yep, so this is Paula. What are you saying? You saying happy to meet you? Saying glad to meet you? You say Paula? You say Paula? Can you? Paula. Maybe later. Okay.
Maybe I could play. Do we want to play some music for Cal?
Yeah.
Totally.
Since that's, I feel like I've been listening to Cal for a long time.
Do you want to hear some music? Do you want to hear it? Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, send it to me.
I will.
Right.
So Cal, your mommy sent me some beautiful recordings of your voice. And
Remember I told you, we were recording them. You've already heard them. It was a while ago. Maybe when you hear them, you'll remember. I think it sounds really beautiful.
do you want to see what it looks like? And so what I've done here is taken different sounds of your everyday life and your voice. I'm going to play you something else. 1 second.
That's pretty wild, huh?
I'll play you another thing. So that's me asking who is human, which are your mommy's words.
So, how would that character communicate on stage, in time with others, and how could we foster a sense of community in the casting of the opera, knowing that opera is notoriously inaccessible? The role needed to be co-created, which was something I know how to do because I work often with improvisers. But the first step is we actually created a disability advisory board, which now I do for all of my projects. And I met an amazing, amazing activist who's an actor from Copenhagen named Jakob Nossel. Jakob essentially helped us create the Disability Advisory Board, but really helped us define the principle for Sensorium AI.
I don't know anything about opera or music but I do know about having a voice. If you don't have a voice, you don't have the power to do what you want to do because having a voice is everything. My inner voice is normal. I speak perfect English or English in my head. When it comes out of my mouth, something is not right or different. So what if we can bring a technology to help me get my inner voice back out there would be awesome.
So the first thing I did is I called my friend Luc Dubois, who's an amazing composer in the field with me and who essentially is the head of their engineering program and this amazing lab called the Ability Lab. And so we created community day sessions, and this actually lasted for about 2 years. And in those community sessions, we really wanted to ask folks, well, what do you want from your augmentative and alternative communication devices? What is the thing that you want the most if we're able to actually, in this opera, create something that's not just for the opera, that's perhaps, for society at large. And so for those of you that don't know what AAC devices are, they essentially help individuals with speech, language, or cognitive impairments communicate. And they range from simple picture boards to advanced speech-generating tablets that involve eye tracking systems, and they essentially provide folks who have autism, ALS, stroke, cerebral palsy, or traumatic brain injuries communicate. So during this, we learned a few things. The first thing, which was actually the most important thing, was Brenda called me up, and it was around Christmas time. And her son, Cal, can't actually use any of these devices. And she said, I've been wanting an answer all these years. And this is really why I wanted to do this opera. I wanted some kind of device to help me communicate with Cal. But really, Cal's been communicating with me all along. I just wasn't listening. And so that was like a really important thing, right? First step. Secondly, was that we learned that while AI, of course, can be and has been used to simulate voice, what we were trying to do was something kind of different. We wanted to work within the community with consent, and we wanted to create essentially an open source tool more akin to a synthesizer. So what if we could like Kate Bush the voice? So these were a few of, and that's Brenda right there. These are a few of our community sessions.
Well, having a voice doesn't mean just talking to someone or having a conversation with someone. Having a voice means speaking up, advocating for yourself, stepping out of their shoes, and hearing their voices loudly in society. I have ischemic cerebral palsy, which affects my speech and my muscle movements. Having trouble controlling muscle movement, twisting, abrupt movements, and severe muscle pain, making it difficult to control my entire body movements and coordination. For example, walking, talking, and arm movements. But this type of cerebral palsy I have doesn't affect my intelligence, so I'm basically stuck in my own body. People have treated me differently since I was young and thought I wouldn't know anything because I was nonverbal. Hence, people used to say very mean stuff right before me without realizing I could understand everything they were saying, making me feel worthless. I didn't even have the confidence to communicate with my computer in public or with my family. I just used it for schoolwork until I found the confidence in myself. I want to teach children around the world that people with disabilities or differences who look or act differently are humans with emotions, too. I don't want anyone to feel how I did.
Yeah, I would say I was checking with Owen to see if he wanted me to share this, but when you first started using AAC, the options were little kid voice and middle-aged man voice. So Owen went with middle-aged British man because why not? It sounds like he's fine. By high school, he was like, and then at that point there was one generic teenage male voice, which he's actually still stuck with, but it doesn't quite sound right. It just builds even more distance between people who are already a little like, how does this work? And then you sound like a computer, and like, Owen does not sound like a computer, and like it doesn't take much time to know, okay, this isn't his voice, this is the way in which he can use it.
But today was really important because it reminds us. So what if we could actually build tools to communicate with on stage, AI for good? So one of our leads who played Kitsune was an actor named Jacob Jordan. Jacob gets stuck in loops, and for the first 22 years of his life, he didn't have access to his voice. His mother then found a communication partner, and through that communication partner, he began to be able to express what was trapped inside. Through Sensorium, Jacob heard what his actual voice sounded like for the first time in his life. So you might ask, how exactly do we do that? So I'm going to take you through the actual science of this, of what we did in the lab.
One of the two actors playing Kitsune, 23-year-old Jacob Jordan. who is himself nonverbal but has a new way of communicating.
For the first 22 years of my life, I felt like a witness to a crime that would happen over and over again. My thoughts were being held hostage inside my head while the wrong words were impersonating me, tricking everyone to believe I was much simpler than I am.
Jacob was diagnosed as a toddler with autism and apraxia, a neurological condition in which his body and speech don't respond to the signals sent from his brain. Here's how he puts it, along with a bit of his characteristic sense of humor.
Basically, my body does not listen to the commands I give it. I may want to ask my friend if he saw that cute girl walk by, but my speaking voice gets stuck in loops, talking about airports or dumb songs and a small variety of other repetitive topics. It also affects my whole body.
Only in the last 2 years came a breakthrough when he learned to type words with a trained communication partner. When he finishes his sentence, it comes out in an electronic voice.
I caught the acting bug.
But in our interview, for which we sent questions ahead of time so he could consider and type responses, we heard more of Jacob's actual voice.
Nothing compares to getting to express myself purposefully with the voice I was born with.
Brought to life through Sensorium AI, a partnership between the opera's creative team and NYU's Ability Project, a research lab in Brooklyn, New York, dedicated to the intersection of disability and technology. Luc Dubois is an NYU professor, engineer, and researcher, and himself a composer and musician. He first recorded the sounds Jacob can and does make.
So we've got recordings of Jacob just doing his thing.
If a part about my going back, if exploitation into
right? So he's very expressive. Some of it is whistles, some of it's singing, some of it's speech like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what the system does is it takes that recording and infers from it the physical body that made it. Okay?
Infers
Yeah,
means you're creating his sense of his body and therefore a sense of his voice.
Exactly. And so what I can do is I can take, a phrase like, I would like to go sailing tomorrow, have it crank through, and then what you would end up with is you would end up with a recording.
I would like to go sailing tomorrow.
Right? And it sounds like Jacob.
Dubois and the team use sensors that allow Jacob to control his speech.
I would like to go sailing tomorrow.
And depending on how he moves his hand, give it a kind of expressiveness of pitch and pace.
So essentially, we debuted Sensorium AI as part of Sensorium X, the opera, in May 2025 at the Common Sensus Festival, which is a radical festival in Omaha that explores and celebrates the uniqueness and commonalities of the human experience through art, science, and disability activism. And then it went to the Royal Opera House 2 weeks ago. But essentially what it does is it transforms raw data, meaning biometrics, music, and movement, into resonant vocal output that sounds very much like using the phonemes of the voice of the actor performing. But the other thing it does is we actually used car sensors because car sensors are cheap and they allow for the maximum amount of hypersensitivity, which means that anyone with any level of spasticity can actually trigger this, meaning that they can, act on stage and do so in time with others. So, so essentially, I guess what I want to say is that what's incredible to me is that this should and can exist, but it doesn't because there's no desire. And so often it's art that really kind of transforms the human experience into something that is needed because of an opera, because of a mother's desire, because of a person's desire to be able to perform and to push creative boundaries. And so really, I will say that many different actors have now used Sensorium AI. We're at the point where we're about to really collaborate with a larger company to make it accessible. And I'm going to play you a little bit of what it sounds like. Those are the car sensors. So those actually are car sensors that cost just a couple dollars each, and they're wired up, with all the technology through the phonemes, to then essentially be able to output the specific lines. The other thing I'll say is that one thing that I loved about Brenda is that the way that she set up the poem was that the poem had bracket answers. And so that was what I was talking about in terms of improvisation with the actor. We came up with those answers together, but for some of the folks, those were not actually verbal answers. They would be whistles, or they might be roars, and so this is really this idea of what is language and how do we express ourselves in the most personal ways. There's Jacob using the tech. And here's a little clip of what it sounds like. So this framework isn't just a tool. So it's an entire narrative and technological ecosystem for change. So we have our impact fellows, and these are fellows that follow the whole trajectory of the work so they learn how to incorporate this into their own work. That's the creative team on the left, the disability advisory board that vetted every step of our way to make sure that what we were doing was really responsive and live. It is a documentary, We Learn to See by Singing in the Dark. It's a book that's going to be published by Penguin Random House Knopf in a week that you can read. It is an album that you can stream. It is an Audible book. And it's essentially, an entire ecosystem. So by marrying ethical data aggregation with radical accessibility, Sensorium AI shifts what could be the cold data collection into an intimate container for human empathy, changing the very definition of what it means to have a voice, because having a voice is everything. So please keep in touch with Sensorium AI, and thank you so much.
Paola Pristini, beautiful work. Our final speaker asks, what happens when we bring AI to the past, and through it, bring the past to the future? Not with killer robots, with killer composers, dead killer composers. Here to help us find out what happens when we use technology to bring great art back to life, Aisha Denise.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Aspen is such a special place for me. I actually spent 3 summers here as a music student at the festival, and I was 13 the first time I came with my mom, of course, because she had to come because I was underage. But it was still fun. I remember practicing next to the water in this amazing nature. So I do want to take you back some time before that, even 3 years before that. So let's, okay, actually, it's here. So this is me. Concerto that I was performing, and it was very, very, very nerve-wracking. That I remember every second of that performance. It was a big deal, and as much as it was a big deal for me, none of my classmates knew who Mozart was. So, after that concert, and there were like 700 people in the audience that day, I went back to school the next day as if nothing happened, and this was really tragic to me because I couldn't share my love for classical music with my classmates, my age group. They didn't know what it was. They thought it was boring, it was sleep music, and they wanted me to play pop music, which I, at the time, hated. And so now I do that too, but you know. But ever since then, communicating with my age group and making classical music accessible has been my mission. And I still have that mission even today. So let's go to a more recent concert I have, which is this one at Disney Hall. Let's see, it's a little excerpt of one of my compositions. I don't know if it's gonna play. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. So this is also a big deal because I was premiering my own music at one of the most amazing venues. So you can hear a little bit of it. And it's on YouTube too. You can watch the whole thing, but this is just the beginning of it, obviously. So, you know, a lot of things happened in my life since those years. So many years passed from that first concert until that last one you saw. And something also didn't change. My love for piano and cats as well. So the two things stayed similar. And also my love for technology, obviously. So I'm not a tech person, but my dad is an engineer. So he has kind of installed curiosity when I was a child in me. And he's kind of like a think outside the box type of guy. So he always wanted me to be more entrepreneurial. And so I thought, you know, okay, so last video you saw, it's like this amazing venue, but everybody's in like tuxedos and it's just so posh and so classy. But then I think those are the things that we actually get judged. And it makes us look really not accessible to people who are, you know, who don't have the means to go to these concerts or have never even been brought by their parents or don't have the opportunities or the money. And which is a lot of people. So I was thinking, how can I make my dream come true? So there's many ways I tried. When I was 10, actually, after that concert, I played a boogie woogie encore. And that was one of my ways of like making classical a little more accessible. And then it turns out that one of the audience members was a bar owner, a jazz bar owner. And he told me, hey, you want to come and play at my jazz bar? And I said, sure. And then he's like, but we have to sneak you in because you're so young, you can't get into the bar. So that was one of my first experiences playing non-classical. And I really liked it. People were like more casual, you know, they were like making more sounds in between the pieces and during my playing. And so I thought, okay, what else I could do? And I thought maybe like years later with AI, maybe I could bring back dead composers. Because like if I could have dinner with some dead people, who would they be? It would be probably Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. We would have a lot of fun at that dinner table. It would be very dramatic too, but very joyful from Mozart's side. And then Beethoven would probably yell at us, and Bach would be like, "Let's be logical, guys. Like let's calculate everything." And so I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna try to use technology to bring them back somehow. What if I could have an interactive conversation? But that had some time, and so that was on my mind. And then I was thinking, how about if I could try these tools out as a musician, as a performer, and somehow my first project became, how about I create my own orchestra of robots, of AI robots, which you'll see, this is my violinist. And so we're gonna play for you an AI-generated tribute to Vivaldi. And this was totally like a random project that came about because I was invited to play at a tech conference and I had nothing to play. And I was thinking, okay, I need to use AI somehow, and why not do a tribute project? So this was this piece that AI and I kind of co-composed as a tribute, and I call it the 5th season. And yeah, thank you. And so here's how it sounds. Thank you. So, you know, I would have loved if I was 10 if I were playing with these guys, you know? Especially the Star Wars inspiration, I think you saw that. And so I was thinking, hey, this is great. I can do stuff with AI. I can generate visuals, I can generate music, I can co-compose, I can do trivia projects, and I can make classical music relevant again, and fun again, and interactive again. And so next thing I thought was, what if Vivaldi actually talked to me? So this is how he would actually look like. All right.
Buongiorno, mio amigo. I am Antonio Vivaldi. I want color and energy and imagination. A melody should soar like a bird and roar like a storm. Let us bring this music to life.
Yeah, so of course, color is one of his main things, and of course he played, you know, he composed this one. So yeah, it's a little arrangement I did, and yeah, so it's really cool that I was able to do that. But you know what? He also talks back to you. So I'm now working on a startup. So I have a startup since January, and it is basically bringing back dead composer as their AI twins. And you can actually ask Vivaldi questions about how he composed that piece, what was happening in his life, what was happening in the world at the time, and hopefully, like, we'll make music accessible to kids who never have the resources to go to, you know, concerts to hear those live performances. Hopefully they will, but this could be a bridge. So I'm very excited about that project. It's an app that we're gonna work with music schools and normal schools, and you have a bunch of tutors, including me. So living composers, living musicians, and some Gen Z tutors as well. So here are some of the pals. We call them pals because the company is called Music Pal. So they're your pals. They're friendly, as opposed to the, you know, to the teacher who beats you for making mistakes. Yeah, I mean, you know, I had those. It's coming from experience. I would not want that on anyone. But you can see there's Haydn, there's Beethoven, there's Maya, Gen Z, you know, Mason. There's Tchaikovsky. He's very emotional. Mozart is very joyful, and Zoe is really cool. So, you know, I thought, why don't I make classical music that represents everyone, all cultures. So we're adding more tutors as we go. It's like the beginning of this project. And I want to show you one more example. This is my favorite one, of course, Chopin.
I am Frédéric Chopin, the poet of the piano. When you don't force the music and let it breathe, it will reveal its true beauty. Let us begin.
So Chopin needs to work on his Polish accent, but we'll get there. But I did want to play for you an AI-generated piece of prelude. I think it's like literally the first AI tribute to Chopin that was ever done. This was like almost 3 years ago now. Crazy. So AI wrote all of it, and all I did was to write down every note that I heard by ear, which was around like 800 notes. It's like looking at a pixel and then like dropping the numbers down of each pixel. I think it captures the soul of Chopin pretty great. So Chopin is very well known for like 3 main things, okay? So first one is, of course, the beautiful melodies. So you know this one. And the accompaniment, you know. And the boyfriend, it's like the boyfriend is like a very steady, supportive guy out there. And then the soprano sings beautiful melodies, and obviously it's because Chopin's love was for the Italian bel canto opera. So that's number one. Second thing he really loved was fire. So, for example, thank you. Yeah, that's actually one of his hardest pieces. It's the coda of the fourth ballade. I don't know why I keep doing that to myself. Like, just start from the hardest part and just play through. Yeah. And another thing he was very well known was his chromaticism. Okay, so like not skipping any of the notes. Like each step, this is chromatic instead of like diatonic. Okay, so you know this one. Here. Okay, yeah, it's so nice. But we don't have time. I would play the whole thing for you otherwise. But so those three things are amazing, and they're like just like signatures of Chopin. So I was looking for those in the AI prelude. I was like, okay, how did the AI do? And I will let you decide, okay? But I'll just tell you a little bit of some of these things you can listen to. First being this beautiful melody on the right hand and the supportive boyfriend on the left. Okay, and then the fiery place. Okay, and then finally, this amazing, nostalgic, and of course he missed home. You know, he's Polish but living in France, and this is like all of the chromaticism that represents his his dreams of going back home but not being able to. So it's kind of sad. So this beautiful melody that AI created was this one. Okay, so I'll play that through for you. This is the AI-generated prelude by AI Chopin, or however you call it. Thank you. I really like the piece. It's so interesting because when I played and I don't tell people it was AI, they love it. And then when I say it's AI, they're like, oh, we hate it. There's no soul in it. I'm like, really? Didn't I just put the soul in it though? Did I? Yeah, thank you. So I guess that's the point, right? Like it's an artist should be able to take a stone or like a piece of plastic and then like make something meaningful out of it, right? That's the whole point of life. That's the whole point of being a human. And I think we have to remember that whenever we're fighting against AI, it has to be for the right reasons. Of course, there are certain things that we have to criticize, but also amazing opportunities. So let me actually, I want to play for you so much more, but we do have limited time. But I want to talk a little bit more about the educational app that I'm building. So imagine if you were a kid and there was a game like this and you could like go through level by level and like explore Chopin's world since he was like a kid until he's like a grown up. I mean, AI knows everything about him. So the way I fine-tuned all of that is precisely by all these like academic papers I could get a hold of, and by really going deep into his world, but in an interactive way, and so making that accessible to kids so that maybe when there's another girl who's 10 years old, maybe she'll go back to her classroom and the next day her classmates are going to be like, wow, we would love to hear you play the Chopin Concerto. You know, that's my dream. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do have a little surprise for you. So, this is the surprise. This is a lot of fun, actually. And so he's Mozart. He's gonna conduct, and I trained him. You'll know what I mean in a second. I trained his conducting skills, which aren't amazing. You know, you'll see. But the orchestra. Well, he'll tell you about it. You know what? I'll let him speak.
Meine Damen und Herren, ladies and gentlemen, how delightful to see so many bright faces gathered for music this evening. I am Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and I welcome you most warmly. Tonight is no ordinary night. It is a celebration of curiosity and invention. At my side is the brilliant pianist Ise Deniz, who will join me in performing a brand new piece created in my style with the help of artificial intelligence.
I did not write that.
It is a short rondo for orchestra and piano. A word, if you please, about a rondo. It is a lively musical form where a main theme returns again and again, like a friend who cannot resist coming back to the party, while new episodes dance in between. And our orchestra tonight? Ach, meine Freunde, it is made entirely of robots. Yes, indeed, mechanical players who never tire, never miss a cue, and yet somehow still surprise me. I confess, I am positively thrilled to conduct them. So open wide your ears and your hearts. Laugh when the notes laugh, sigh when they sigh, and marvel as the past shakes hands with the future. Together, let us make music.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Give it up again for Aisha Denise. And let's get the rest of our speakers up here on stage. We have Sasha Stiles, Paola Prestini, and we've been taking a look at AI creativity and the innovation that happens between them and what the opportunity is here. We have a little bit of time for a few questions from the audience. I'm sure you all have thoughts. Yes? Yes. And we have a mic for you here.
Thank you all so much for sharing with us. I'm curious, this question first occurred to me in the first presentation, but I think carries throughout. You're all working with forms, as a humanities student, a student of English, working with forms that we're taught are so sacred, that everything is so deliberate about what these sort of mythical feature beings like Mozart and the poets and sort of artists of the past did was so deliberate, every choice. And with AI, I think we hear so much about how it's not really deliberate. It's just mimicry, or it's just doing some sort of imitation of that. So how do you think about the tension between what we're taught to hold so dear about art, that it's about these deeply, deeply intentional choices made by human beings, and the way in which you're thinking about embodying that humanity in these systems you're building?
Go ahead.
I think it was for you.
Sure, I can take that to begin with. No, it's a great question. I think part of my practice is really maybe challenging that prevailing idea that AI is really just this push button process and that it really is all about just like churning something out. My process with AI is actually a lot more complicated and a lot more involved than just sitting down with a pencil and like writing a poem longhand. I spend many more hours training models and generating versions and drafts and things like that. And that's actually what I love about it, is it's really kind of creating other forms of creative practice and craft. So I think, part of part of the answer to your question is I think we need to sort of maybe resist some of the prevailing narratives around what AI is, and remember that just because we're sort of seeing tech companies rolling out products for X, Y, or Z, that doesn't, that's not necessarily what AI is about or what AI can do. Those are small slivers of what the capabilities are, and I think it's up to artists and amazing visionaries like all of you who are really sort of pushing the boundaries and continuing to sort of remind us that we are at the very, very earliest stages of what this technology represents. We are barely scratching the surface. We are taking baby steps forward, and it's up to all of us to really be involved in this and create the kinds of processes, the kinds of approaches to build in the values that are really going to make it as meaningful as as all of those other forms of art have become over time. Poetry didn't become sacred and canonical, the first couple years that poetry existed. So I think part of this is taking a step back and looking at the longer trajectory of all of it. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I guess I would just say also that, the ethics behind it means that, if it's done responsibly, it can actually give a lot of opportunity and a lot of ability. But it does have to be done responsibly, especially in a moment where, for artists living today, the future is very unsustainable. So it's a deep ethical minefield that we're navigating every day.
Mm-hmm. And Aisha, anything come up for you about this?
I agree. I think it's just simply put, I have an allergy towards people who think something is so sacred that it's unreachable, because those people weren't really living like that. Like Mozart was a servant, It's like he wasn't considered the god of music, and why should we change that perspective to make it unreachable? Make his music and make that culture. So I'm really all about accessibility at this point, and I think we actually overlap with various different fields, making music and art accessible to wider audiences and people. So I think, yeah.
Well, I'd like to appreciate the level of selflessness that each of you show in your different ways in your field. We've been on this journey looking at, what could be different about how we interpret what art and AI mean together. On one hand, from the start, it was more of an internal process, working with poetry, what happens in our own self-journey and expression. And then we move from there to what it means to work with other people, what it means to help someone else find their voice. And then we ended up in a place where we're looking at the bigger picture across time, where we're somehow in a world where we have these futuristic robots playing music that don't want to kill us. So when you think about it that way, it's not a bad place to be. This has been ChopinGPT, a look at AI and creativity. Thank you all for so much being here. Thank you all. And have a great rest of the week here at Aspen Ideas Fest.